First of all, again, welcome to the webinar today. The session today, we are really putting the focus on women as customers, and also to highlight the question of how can we measure impact in terms of advancing gender inclusion. So I'm Maxime. Oops. I'm the lead of Impact Intelligence and Education at Roots of Impact. In the past 3 years almost, I've also been leading a program called B-Briddhi in Bangladesh together with Lancaster partners that have been funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. So B-Briddhi has been an ecosystem building program specifically focusing on building up impact entrepreneurs as well as building up the market for impact investment. Under this program, we have been organizing many different types of activities and events, as well as transaction under the pillar of capacity building, specifically focusing on impact measurement and management, as well as investment readiness. And then we also have a part which is focusing on the transaction side, which is catalytic financing, where we have been providing matching funding to impact enterprises that reach certain impact target. And then the third pillar is also advocacy work that we work very much closely with the National Advisory Board of Impact Investing in Bangladesh. Here are some key figures about B-Briddhi for those of you who are not familiar with this program. As I mentioned, we have 3 major pillars of activities: capacity building, catalytic financing, as well as advocacy. So far we have supported at least 9 local intermediaries and 74 impact enterprises. We have published an impact management toolkit, which we will also announce the launch of the gender chapter today. Under the catalytic financing part, we have so far closed a transaction under the impact ready matching funds, as well as 4 transactions under social impact incentives, of which Maya is one of the companies that receive a zinc, and we have Ivy, the founder, and also the CEO to join us today. And then we also have published an innovative finance toolkit that is also available on our website. So yeah, there has been a lot of activities going on. And under this context, we have worked together with the National Advisory Board of Impact Investing in Bangladesh last year and published the Bangladesh Impact Investment Strategy and Action Plan. The reason why I brought it up is because, you know, in this action plan, it has specifically mentioned that gender and inclusion angle is recommended to be integrated via impact investing. And it has been prioritized as one of the major recommendations out of this report. Given this context, B-Briddhi have decided that we have also would like to dedicate resources to raise awareness about the concept of gender lens, how to incorporate it in the activities of impact investing, but also in terms of supporting impact entrepreneurs. When you look at gender lens, here is actually the spectrum of gender lens. And I think the definition or the category of 2X challenge has always been very helpful for us to better understand and dissect what exactly we meant by gender inclusion. Very often we talk about gender inclusion in the impact investment space and focus very much on women in leadership, workplace equity, or women founders, women entrepreneurs. This is super important in the space of impact investing. In fact, we have already organized the first of our webinar series last year to talk about this specific aspect, gender inclusion through investing. How can we do that from the perspective of women founders? But this year, as you can see also, there are many other aspects of gender lens beyond women in leadership and women founders. And it also has been very important for us to try to understand what exactly are the impact that we're generating for the end users. And in this case, which would be women, as well as how can the women in the supply chain also be affected. And therefore, this year we have decided that the webinar, we would like to also shift the angle a little bit towards women as customer and look at impact measurement and management from that perspective. I think, so it's quite interesting because I think women being a big market is already being acknowledged since quite a long time. And this actually is a quote from a report back in 2013 from Ernst & Young, acknowledging that women are the next emerging market in the world, considering that female income would be continuously rising, and the rate of increment would outpace the GDP growth of some of the major economies like India and China in the next few years. At the same time, in the context of developing markets, which I think is quite important in this webinar as well, is that women also often are business owners as well in many of the contexts. And yet there are so many different types of challenges that they face that are specific to the gender norms of the specific environment that they're working in. That also has a certain implication in terms of helping us to understand what exactly are the impact that we can generate and to support women as customers in terms of how we design the product or the service delivery, as well as how do we want to intentionally include women in the process and finally achieve gender inclusion and empowerment. Very often when we talk about the topic of inclusion and equity, I think this picture has always been very helpful. If we think about women as the next big emerging market with a lot of business value, what I would like to challenge all of us to think a little bit further is it enough just to get the product or the service to the hand of the woman? Or can we even do better to understand, is woman getting the same value out of this product or service as the other gender would do through the experience? And so that's something that's I think is quite relevant in terms of, for example, UX design or product design in the process. When we talk about gender inclusion with the lens of focusing women as customers. And so with that as the context, we have launched this year a gender lens chapter as an addition to the impact measurement and management toolkit that we published 2.5 years ago. This toolkit specifically is designed to help entrepreneurs, accelerators, and incubators that are just beginning to step into the journey of including the gender lens in the product and service delivery design process, but also for incubators, accelerators to think about how can I design a program that supports entrepreneurs that is gender inclusive. Because very often when we talk about gender inclusion or women empowerment, the topic of supporting women entrepreneurs also come up quite often. But how can we also address this part through the design of incubation and acceleration program design? There's also quite a few tips in this toolkit that we have included. So it could be interesting for those of you who are the incubator or who are in this particular category today. And apart from that, there's also a particular section that focuses on organizational leadership and management, as in how can we, as an organization, also to incorporate gender lens internally to make sure that not only that, we have a certain representation from different gender in the team, but also how can we ensure in terms of our communication and internal organization that gender lens is being applied. So for those of you who are interested, I think our team has posted also the link to this gender chapter of the IMM toolkit in the chat box. So do feel free to check it out. Yeah, we have our team have dedicated quite a bit of resources and effort into it. So I hope you will find it interesting, regardless whether you are an entrepreneur, someone working for an impact enterprise, or incubator and accelerator, and get some inspiration and idea about to kickstart also this journey of measuring your impact when it comes to gender inclusion. With that as an introduction and setting the context of the webinar today, I would like to introduce you to our fabulous panelists today. I'm really excited that we have a really good and interesting mix of perspective from our panelists today. So first of all, we have Natasha. Natasha is the lead of advisory and advocacy at Roots of Impact, where she develops tools and advice for partner and implementers of impact-linked finance. She's also managing the impact-linked fund for gender inclusive fintech. Before joining Roots of Impact, Natasha led the Innovative Finance Initiative at the Bertha Center for Social Innovation, an organization using creative and disruptive tools to drive capital towards better social outcomes. She designed and launched innovative impact funds, managed a secretariat of the Impact Investing National Advisory Board, co-convened the University of Cape Town's Impact Investing in Africa course, and developed impact strategies for Pan-African financial institutions. Prior to this, Natasha also managed the technical assistant portfolios of financial institutions in Africa, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia at FMO, the Dutch Development Bank. And she had the privilege of serving the advisory and investment committees of multiple blended finance impact funds and engaging with impact entrepreneurs ready for investment. She is passionate about financial inclusion and has a certificate in rethinking financial inclusion, as well as migrant remittances and financial services from Harvard Kennedy School. So thanks for being here today, Natasha. And
thanks, Max. Lovely to be here.
And afterwards, we will listen to Neela. Neela Mitchell, she's the head of Kenya office at 60 Decibels. Thanks for being here with us today, Neela. She's leading the East African team and the work in gender. She's an international development in gender specialist with experience in consulting to social enterprises, impact investors, corporates, and development agencies on social impact, inclusive business, and women's economic empowerment. She has a background in international relations and economics from Boston University and also an MA in gender studies from SOAS, University of London. Thanks for joining us today, Neela.
Thank you.
And finally, we have also Ivy Russell from Maya. She's an entrepreneur. So she's the founder and CEO of Maya. And she launched Maya back in 2015. Maya is a health tech platform where users can ask questions to Maya's licensed doctors and mental health counselors related to medical, health, and well-being, psychological, social, lifestyle, and fitness concerns via app and web. So prior to that, she actually ran it as a blog for market research for women, predominantly mothers in Bangladesh, to gain more insights of the region. Ivy completed her master in finance and economics at Warwick Business School before spending quite a few years as an investment management professional at leading firms, including HSBC, GAM, and Barclays. She's also a World Economic Young Global Leader since 2019. So thank you for joining us today, Ivy. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Maxime, and so great to meet Neela and Natasha. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Natasha. Just give me a second. I would share a different slide deck. Here we go. So Natasha, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Max. Right, today I'm going to be sharing a bit around our impact-linked fund for gender inclusive fintech and how we are specifically looking at tying finance to gender outcomes for women. So if we go to the first slide, please. So when it comes to boosting financial inclusion for underserved women, fintechs are incredibly well placed. Their solutions often provide improved convenience, lower transaction fees, simpler application processes, and better security than traditional banking services, and are therefore better able to meet women's individual needs. And so time and time again, fintech has been shown to offer solutions that improve the welfare and the lives of women. If we can go to the next slide. And yet, the gender gap in fintech uptake remains significant. At almost 28%, the gender gap is greater than the gaps for other financial and digital services, which shows us that access to devices and the internet is not responsible for the significant difference in fintech uptake between the two genders. So why is the gap so big? This is according to the data that we have here. Well, one reason is that fintechs focus on serving early adopters, especially when starting out, to grow their user base as fast as possible. And because men are often perceived to be early tech adopters, whether this is supported by data or not, many fintechs tailor their products and services and their marketing to men. Or they take what we call gender neutral approach to doing business. And in doing so, unintentionally bias their products and services to men by not actively considering the needs and preferences of their female clients. By the time these fintechs are operating at scale, they're caught in a self-reinforcing spiral of catering predominantly to male users. So despite its amazing promise, fintech is leaving female clients behind. If we can go to the next slide. So in addition, fintechs that are most likely to serve female clients often struggle to raise capital and scale. So inclusive fintechs and female-founded fintechs have been shown to be most likely to reach female end clients. And yet these two groups really struggle to raise the capital they need to grow and scale their business. Inclusive fintechs made up only 1% of the total capital raised by fintechs in 2019, and female-founded fintechs made up just 1.3% of the total VC raised in the same year. So there's a clear mismatch between where capital is flowing if we want to prioritize the needs of underserved women. Can we go to the next slide? So how do we address this mismatch between capital and impact? So we do this by tying finance directly to the impact created. And this is where impact-linked finance comes in. So impact-linked finance is all about unleashing the full potential of impact enterprises by providing better terms for better impact. And the premise is really quite simple. When enterprises create social value, for example, when a fintech focuses on improving livelihoods of marginalized women, this impact is generally not compensated or rewarded in any way. And impact-linked finance corrects for this market failure by pricing and rewarding positive outcomes. So when a fintech focuses on improving the life of a female client, it's rewarded for doing this. And these rewards also improve the commercial viability of the enterprise, which helps it attract further investment that enables the business to grow and scale, which magnifies its impact even further. Next slide. So how does this work in practice? So fintechs are directly rewarded with financial incentives for achieving gender transformative impact. And this improves their profitability, which in turn helps to attract additional investment. So the incentives payments can be made directly to the fintech, or it can be embedded into the investment terms. So we've got the ILF for GIF there that provides these financial incentives for gender outcomes to the fintechs, either directly or embedded in their investment terms. And the ILF for GIF also works with renowned investment fund partners who you can see on the screen there, who are aligned in their impact goals. And then at the bottom of the slide, you'll see our ecosystem enabler partners, which we also have. So the ILF for GIF is very intentional about taking an ecosystem approach, supporting partners to build the ecosystem and pipeline of fintechs that will support gender inclusivity, particularly for marginalized women. Next slide. Of course, if you're going to tie impact to finance, that requires that this impact is measured and managed robustly. So each transaction that we do will benefit from a bespoke incentive structure that's designed in partner with the fintech to ensure that gender impact is reached across the full value chain. And here are a few of the indicative measurements that we'll be using. So first, in the blue box circle there, livelihood improvements for end clients, it really is the key. So these include increased income or cost savings, improved economic activity, and stronger financial literacy and health. Secondly, the ILF for gender inclusive fintech focuses on better terms for better impact, which means we want to incentivize the hardest to reach, most vulnerable women, such as migrants. So we have specifically measure and monitor the vulnerable women and migrants that are reached. And finally, we know that supporting gender equity at the ownership, board, and staff level means an improved focus on women as end clients. So we have specific metrics that focus on those levels as well, with the intention of reaching the end client. And so that's a very quick run through of what we're doing with the Impact Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive FinTech.
Thanks a lot, Natasha. I think I have a few questions that I would like to also dive a little bit deeper when we talk about the topic of impact measurement, especially when it comes to the topic of gender inclusion and focusing women also as customers. So how do you understand or define the impact area of gender inclusion in GIF? I see that in the last slide, you have identified quite a few, but would you be able to share a little bit more how you would be able to measure that in the transaction that GIF would be taking care of?
Sure. So we know that the business case for women is there when it comes to fintech. A recent study by the Financial Alliance for Women showed that if fintechs were going to increase their female customer conversion rates to the same levels as men conversion rates across the sales funnel, then those fintechs would see a 70% increase in revenues. So the business case is already there for fintechs. But because fintechs tend to adopt a gender blind or gender neutral focus, they're often unintentionally focusing on men and losing out on all this business. And really, it would be very simple steps to rectify this that would make a huge difference to their business and to their gender impact. So although we definitely want to encourage things like sex disaggregated data collection and reaching more women, we also want to go beyond just counting the number of women who have access to finance. We want to see that these products and services that the women are using actually have an impact on their clients' lives and livelihoods. So for this reason, we look at metrics that relate to improved income, increased savings, more economic activity, and stronger financial health. And we do this at multiple levels, as I showed on the last slide. We do this at the customer level, at the staff level, and at the board and ownership level. And we do that firstly because it affects the woman at all those levels, which is positive, but also because we know that the more focus that we have on having women at the board and ownership and the staff level, the more likely an enterprise is to develop tools and products and services that are going to address the needs of end clients being women. So a core principle of impact-linked finance is better terms for better impact, which means that we're prioritizing the harder to reach and the vulnerable woman. So we are specifically looking at metrics that are focused on hard to reach women, for instance, like migrants.
Thanks, Natasha. Would you be able to share a little bit on also how in an IRF or impact-linked finance, how we connect the impact performance of the pipeline candidates to financial incentives in this specific context of GIF?
Sure. So we work specifically with fund manager partners, and then we use a number of impact-linked finance tools, such as social impact incentives, which are time-limited premium payments that are paid for achieving gender impact. Or we use things like impact-linked loans, which is basically a loan where the interest rate on the loan decreases the more gender transformative impact is achieved. And we've got a whole toolbox of these impact-linked instruments that we can use, which are tailored to the needs of the enterprise and align with what the investor is doing. So we work very much on a bespoke case-by-case basis with the enterprise and with the investor to design a structure that is best going to support and incentivize the fintech to really reach women and change their lives.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Natasha. So with that, I think we've learned a little bit about the latest GIF, like the latest fund of impact-linked finance that focus on gender inclusion, especially in fintech. but I think it could also be interesting to also hear from some on the ground experience from Nila of 60 decibels, how data can be collected on the ground, what are the specific methods that has been used at 60 decibels, and what are some of the lessons learned specifically when it comes to gathering data, and how can we make sure that it's inclusive to all genders. So Nila, I'll pass over the stage to you.
Great, thank you, Maxine. It's great to be here. Let me just, if it's okay, I'll share my screen so I can share my slides. Are you able to see them?
Yes, perfect.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll be speaking a little bit about the work we're doing on gender here at 60 decibels. I think to frame it a little bit, I'll share our overall approach and then get into a few more specifics on what we're looking at in terms of measuring gender impact and the experience of women customers. So to start, 60 decibels, for those who don't know, is an impact measurement company. We've been working in this space for a number of years now, and what we really aim to do is take a bottom-up approach to impact measurement and the focus on sort of end beneficiaries, customers, employees of companies and organizations working in sectors as varied as financial inclusion to off-grid energy and agriculture and more. We want the data on the impact to move beyond, the number of women or people reached. This is something Natasha also sort of mentioned, number of products distributed, et cetera, to the actual outcomes and changes that women and men are experiencing on the ground. Our name 60 decibels actually refers to the average volume of human conversation. And so you can see that our focus is on customers' voices. In terms of our approach, we listen to these various different stakeholders, primarily through short phone-based interviews that allows us to gather data quickly and can be analyzed and turned back to companies in a timely manner. We also benchmark operational and impact data, so organizations can not only see where they sort of stand amongst their peers, but actually learn from that, maybe to make data-driven decisions on how they can adjust their business models and how they can create potentially, more impact and generally serve their customers better. We work with a number of different types of organizations, from social investors and development finance institutions and foundations to social enterprises and NGOs and nonprofits. Our approach, again, centers around hearing customers' voices. And the way we sort of conduct these phone interviews is in the local language. So we have a really large researcher network in more than 70 countries who speak a number of different languages and dialects, which allows us to hear from a larger number of people directly. We then will do the analysis and benchmark the data on certain indicators and present, companies and funders with these results. So through lean data, which is what we call our approach, today we've worked with around 600 companies on over 1,000 projects. And through these projects, we've heard from we've conducted 170,000 interviews. But what I want to draw your attention to is actually the percent of women respondents who we've interviewed. At the moment, out of the 170,000, approximately 43% are women. And so you can see there's a large gap between, the voices, women's voices who are hearing from compared to the men. And I'll come back to some of the challenges with this shortly. But for now, this is, where our experience sort of is. There we go. So where our gender experience really started was with Acumen. We were sort of incubated there. And this is when, a few years ago, we launched our Lean Data How-To Guide to measuring gender impact. And since then, we've sort of worked on several projects to measure women's empowerment and gender impact. They've related to the influence of national media campaigns on female genital mutilation in different countries. In the past year, we've also worked in sort of gender impact in energy and financial inclusion, education, et cetera. We're taking a sector-specific we're we're starting to take a sector-specific approach. Now with some of my colleagues really pushing on this in the energy space, we're also looking at it in the financial inclusion space. So developing sort of questions and metrics that are sector agnostic, but also being able to dive in a little bit more. We see a few opportunities to reach women within companies. I've listed 2 here, but of course there are more. One is as the registered customers, and the other is primary users. So the registered customers are, of course, an important market segment that we need to hear from and that companies need to sort of understand in terms of how exactly their products and services are accessed, how they're used, and the changes that they're experiencing from them. The other is the primary users. Oftentimes, the main user is not actually the registered customer. So it's important to hear from those users, oftentimes a lot of women, as much as possible. Moving to our gender lenses, Maxime has already mentioned sort of 2x in the different criteria that is used, but we basically focus on these top 2, sort of related to supporting companies that provide products and services aimed at women or that close a gender gap, and depending on business, sort of extending to employees and supply chains. A lot of our projects related to gender so far have been kind of custom, but often incorporate some elements of the gender themes that I've outlined here. So power and agency related to decision-making within a household. This can include understanding who makes a decision on a product purchase. Similarly, who has control over the budget for this type of purchase? What degree of negotiating power does a woman have in the household for these decisions? Another dimension is looking at women's empowerment in terms of controlling one's own finances and making decisions over those. We also look at time use. Does a particular product or service help a woman save time? And then we also look at sort of self-confidence and social acceptance. You know, I want to caveat this by saying we can't always measure all the impact, of course, or in terms of a woman being sort of empowered, but these are some of the areas in which we are able to gather data. And then finally, the other element, of course, is reaching women is our methodology. One of the biggest kind of challenges we've faced, as you can see from the numbers that I mentioned earlier, is getting women on the phone to be able to have these conversations. And this can be due to a lack of phone, of course, lack of privacy, needing permission, and then other social and sort of structural, social norms and structural issues that kind of limit this. So the different areas we're using to experiment with how to reach more women, hear from them, understand their experience. I mean, these are just a few, but ensuring some of our, in projects that are, you know, a little bit more sensitive, ensuring that our female enumerators are matched with female respondents. It's not yet a sort of company-wide or project-wide practice, but and we're sort of tracking response rates and if there is a difference in that, but certainly for more of our sensitive sort of questions and studies. We also often speak to one respondent in the household, but we're looking at, for different projects, you know, being able to speak to 2. That way, if the registered customer is a man, for instance, maybe we're able to speak to their partner and also get that perspective. And then in terms of some of our sort of standard training with our research assistants, making sure they know how to understand if someone is in sort of distress or maybe isn't able to answer openly, and kind of building the rapport to allow them to feel comfortable. So these are just a few of the areas. I think we might be able to get more into them with some of the questions, but I will turn it back to you, Maxine. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nila. I think this is very interesting. I think it was also, in our previous conversation, you also mentioned some of the challenges in terms of making sure, like, how we can reach the women, which you have mentioned a little bit. But I think it's also I think you also mentioned the timing of the calls, which I find quite interesting, and maybe also how to build rapport with respondents. I think those are quite key. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. In terms of building rapport, even from the way we sort of design our surveys, which again are, let's say for a 15-minute survey, you might be able to ask 25, 30 questions, which are both quantitative, with answer options, and then open-ended. And sort of being able to get that type of deeper data with the open-ended questions. We sort of ask more factual questions at the beginning rather than changes. So for instance, where did you first access, a certain product? How did you hear about it? Things that might not be so sensitive necessarily. And then later on in the survey, when the research assistant has been able to make the respondent a little bit more comfortable in answering these types of questions, we'll start asking about, have there been any changes to quality of life? Can you explain those changes? And then, potentially certain other questions about their household. So it is a bit about sort of flow and just making sure that the respondent is comfortable. There's definitely elements of consent and kind of checking in with the respondent to make sure they're comfortable asking the questions, that they know they can not answer if they're not comfortable, etc. So that's one piece. On timing, certainly, it's really important, and we do this across, it's not just sort of men and women, but we will do callbacks if we can't reach them the first time or the second time at different times of the day, on different days. And certainly, there might be a difference for men and women in terms of when they can be reached. And so that's something we're mindful of as well.
Perfect, thank you. I think we talk a lot about like how much effort and thinking that have been put into the design of data collection. So maybe also to wrap up this particular conversation, why do we have to put so much effort in collecting gender disaggregated data? What's the value behind?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. I think men and women experience these products and services differently. Whether that is an off-grid energy product or a loan, a microfinance loan, and so we can't, one person's response or one segment's response isn't going to be the same for others. So in terms of understanding, who has been reached and the extent and type of changes that they've experienced in their sort of quality of life, et cetera, or that the challenges they're facing, it's really important to, separate those and understand them individually as well as in relation to each other. And so that is, it is, even if we're not sex disaggregating the results in every single project, we definitely look out for the trends and differences within that data.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Nila. I think also it was quite interesting because some of the challenges that you have mentioned in your session, actually, I think our next panelists have also came across some of them in her own company in Maya. And maybe Ivy can also talk a little bit more about that in terms of how they organize themselves to understand what value are they creating to their customers, and to also distinguish who are the registered customer versus the actual end users. I think Maya does have quite a bit of an experience to share. So Ivy, would you like to share with us some of your experience and also share with us what Maya is about to the audience that haven't come to know about Maya yet?
Sure, thank you for that. It was really nice listening to Nila and Natasha. Nila, I'm not sure if you know, but Maya had an opportunity to work with 60 Decibels when we got our grant from Humanity United. And it was it was a really lot of learning for us, particularly in terms of how we look at like our focus group discussions, what is the difference between data and impact. So we're very grateful to 60 decibels to kind of guide us towards our first rules of assessing impact, because before it was, Maya was just a very data-driven company. We have data, which means we have impact, but that was not the case. So we learned it the hard way. And 60 decibels was very crucial in shaping that for us. So I just wanted to share that. This was back in 2018 when we got our grant from Humanity United, which is, as you said, is a part of the Acumen group and that. So starting with myself, I grew up in Bangladesh. Then I was working in finance for a bit, as Maxime introduced. And then really out of personal challenges, out of my own pregnancy and my mother, these two personal challenges is what made Maya, or how this is when I conceived the idea of Maya. So it's really, in one word, it's a telehealth company. But what is Maya is essentially, your one-stop healthcare solution for health and mental health. Although mental health is something that we added later on as we felt the need. But what happened essentially, if I can just start the story a little bit, is my mom, whose name is Maya, was diagnosed with cancer. She fought cancer very bravely, but in the meantime, she was finding it hard to overcome her depression. She didn't want to even accept that she had depression, as a lot of the population in Bangladesh and in the neighboring countries do. We tried to take her to certain counselors, therapists, and she didn't just want to be seen in those waiting rooms, thinking everyone's going to judge her. So she felt stigmatized and tabooed. And this is, my mother, who's very well-traveled, well-exposed, and she was feeling that. And that was kind of like the start of my research, where I was like, oh, there's a huge gap in this market where people, especially women, don't have a platform where they can easily talk about something very personal, as their personal parts of the body, but as well as mental issues that are very personal. So that was the start of the blog, which I ran for a bit before I started the business angle of it. And the blog got a lot of traction. And that's how, when we realized that this is needed for a country where the patient to doctor ratio is 4,000 to 1, patient to psychiatrist ratio is 1,000,000 to 1, something like that was needed. So from a blog, it quickly turned to a consulting platform where we have users coming and seeking consultations on their health and mental health. So in terms of the barriers, we try to remove all the barriers. We respond in local language, as Neela was also saying, that it's very important that we understand our users firstly in our local language. And it gives easy access to expert advice anonymously. All you need is a phone. The distributed on-demand network of experts who are leveraged on in an advanced Uber-like AI model. It goes to them, and these queries are then vetted and then answered. So from there, we have digital prescription. We have various other products that in the next slide, I will take you through, if that's okay. If I can go to the next slide, please. So far, we have about 15 million plus users on our platform. We have done, I think this is a bit outdated, but we've done close to 7 to 8 million consultations to date. Considering it's a community platform, it's a consumer platform, our rating is good. And we have about 300 to 400 active users on any given month. And in order to address this huge gap in the market, as I was saying previously, we have quickly realized, me and my team, that we really needed to leverage technology. And for us to leverage technology, we, like I said, like the patient to doctor ratio, I think now is 3,500 to 1. We will need to access technology, leverage technology. And for that, we really started with language. So we focused with messaging and language, where users ask us consultations in Bengali. We have invested in AI and NLP, natural language processing, where right now 60 to 65 to 75% of our consultation is processed by AI, and the rest of it is answered by human. And those are mostly the more complex questions that humans should be given. to, and with an accuracy of 95%. So in essence, every 17 seconds, we receive one unique consultation. And by saying all this, I still feel, we've just scratched 1% of the journey. There's so much more to do in healthcare, so much barriers, so much gap. But I also appreciated what Natasha shared is a lot of the healthcare issues are kind of correlated with financial stability and how they are able to access or afford healthcare. So that goes hand in hand. And if I may just go to the next slide. So as you can see, Maya adds really unique value to our customers, especially women. We have a rural percentage, almost 50% rural population of Bangladesh users are using Maya, and urban 51%. Now here, again, as you can see, 45% of our users are female, and 55% currently, it increased actually recently. It was kind of like more 44 before towards men and the rest towards female. But what we have seen is for us, to be honest, it's something that I feel good towards, in the sense, me and my team, because we feel like men are more getting involved in their women, their lives, for the physical and the mental attention that they need in their day-to-day life. So a husband asking on behalf of his wife, a boyfriend asking on behalf of his girlfriend, mother asking, asking about his mother and daughter. I think it's amazing because now the coexistence is starting to happen, and men are coming forward to understand more problems in the healthcare division. However, I think this number would not stand here, because it would be much higher, because women take really much more interest in not just their health, but the health of their community, of their, the family, the extended family, like father-in-law, mother-in-law, cousins. However, because of the latest GSMA report says that Bangladesh has 29%, I think close to 30% gender gap in the ownership of mobile phones, and only 53% in the use of mobile internet. This obviously means that women are 29% less likely than men to own a mobile phone, and 52% less likely than men to use mobile internet. That in itself just explains the entire the equity problem in terms of accessing healthcare information, or even education, or even anything that needs to be, said and delivered to women. Internet penetration rates are higher for men than women worldwide, right? So this is where I think, in terms of, no matter how much we are building and we are creating, as you will see in the next slide, the type of products that Maya has, this, I think, is a bigger issue that I would like to voice, where as a country or as a region, we are overcoming this problem, and how at a policy level we can lift this up, because only then, I'm 100% sure that only then more women are going to come into the system, and more men are, although I have no problem male using Maya, but I think female should also be increasing the numbers as well. If we then now move to the next slide. So in terms of, how we are trying to address our products and customize our products so that the marginalized community can use it as well. As you've seen, as I've been talking about the previous data, it's hard to reach women because of the digital divide on its own, on a macro level. So when it comes to trying to reach more women and more marginalized women, a little bit, the mid or the bottom of the pyramid, we have been increasingly working with the RMG sector, which is, as you all know, is like 5 million garments workers. 70% of them are female, and it's the target group that we focus, which is anywhere between 17 and 24. So with that, we've been working closely with brands like Primark. We're close to working on another deal with Inditex. We've previously worked with Marks and Spencer, and this has been an amazing way to get entrance to these garments factory workers who usually don't have much time for their healthcare, but because Maya is their healthcare partner, we are available to them 24/7. They can talk to us after their work hours or before their work hours, lunchtime, because they're not really allowed to use the phone when they're on the production floor. that has really helped us to understand much more the diversity of the problems that this segment of the population faces on a day-to-day basis, rather than a more urban population, city girl going where she has her own sets of problems. So this is something I wanted to just highlight, that how Maya, by working with the RMG sector in Bangladesh and hopefully in other countries, will be able to kind of address a wider challenge or address to a wider network of women and understand different kinds of problems that are coming straight from the ground. Moving to the next one. So this is just a quick breakdown on what we see in terms of the tags and the type of consultations we get. So women asking questions around Bangladesh, this is just a physical health breakdown. We also have a mental health one. So as you can see, pregnancy remains the highest number of consultations. I grew up in Bangladesh and I did not have any sex education when I was growing up. So when I became pregnant for the first time, I myself had so many questions that my mom or my sister didn't answer to me. And that applies to so many women that are seeking consultations in Maya. So pregnancy, menstruation, any gynecological issues, abortion, these are kind of like our top categories. And then you can, again, break it down. You can break down pregnancy into different layers. You can break down menstruation into different layers. For example, when you go from lifestyle, mental health and food and nutrition, the next one is physical health and how it's divided into like pediatric and all of that. And then the third tier becomes like pregnancy and anything good. So we can keep slicing and dicing these kind of data. There's a similar one for men, for when men are asking questions, because men also have their own issues. They're the highest in terms of like trying to commit suicide, drug and substance abuse. So they have their own set of problems, but it's amazing that they're coming and sharing those. Moving to the next slide, please. So as you can see here, these are kind of like the product offering that we do, that we try to be mostly focused on women. So before I just highlight this diagram, how the journey started, I explained, which was basically, I started with a blog and just a website. Then it became consultation where anonymously women and people could just ask questions. And then it became digital prescription. From digital prescription, it became like how we can combine pharmacy and labs, which is still, the pharma and lab phase are still in the beta phase for Maya. And then we added the B2B sector in terms of how we can go to businesses and offer on a B2B2C basis. And lastly, also selling female discreet hygiene products. So, we are sitting on so much data, how we are matching those data to make sure that the end-to-end journey for our female users is complete. So they just not only just coming for consultation. If they're needing medication, we can provide them. If they're needing any products that they find awkward to go to the pharmacy and ask for, we are providing it for them. So here you can see we have 100% electronic record of all the consultations, where AI is used and NLP is used to make sure that as soon as a consultation comes in, the AI understands the length, the complexity, the urgency of the question, and then delivers it accordingly. If not, it gets passed to the human expert. Then we have the free digital health tools. So for us, the consultation and the tools are like the hook, especially since they're all done in Bengali. And then lastly, like pharmacy referrals, dedicated care advisor, counselor throughout the hotline services that we have in the RMG factories, and then 24/7 access to qualified experts. And then when we are working with the factories, for example, Primark, we offer them dashboard and reporting in a personalized or a customized way, where it helps them to gain more transparency in the supply chain. So which means that we obviously don't reveal the name and the identity number, but we reveal the categories of the problems and the issues that each garments factory is facing. And accordingly, Primark and that garments factory can work together to reduce that. Moving on to the next slide. I think that was the previous slide, yeah.
No, there's no further slides up to this.
Okay, that's fine. So I think, yeah, this is I just wanted to show like a rough, quick breakdown of what we offer. And as I was saying that, the discrepancy in the digital divide of how women have less access to internet, have less access to mobile phones, is something that definitely needs to be fixed, not just for health, but for financial inclusion, as Natasha was saying. But I think even if it's not like, even if we don't look at it as a Bangladesh problem, it's a global problem, just not on health, but in terms of access as well. Like, we know all these stats and facts are available to us, and we all know that women total like 3.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs. Worldwide, only 8% of the top executives are female. On an average, even in the United States, like the largest economy, or the Caucasian women earn 77% to the dollar, whereas an African women earns 57. And then, so there's a digital divide, not just in terms of accessing internet, but also having that financial capability to access something like health and mental health, especially when mental health is considered not even an issue in region like ours. So there's much more education and much more training and much more awareness that needs to be built towards mental health. Like, even for Maya, for the longest time, and this is coming from like our own experience, from our users just did not want to talk about mental health issues. They're like, as soon as we would address it, they would say, no, I don't have that issue. That's not for me. You tell me just what's wrong about what can I fix during my pregnancy. And that's all. So going back, like, even when we look at women who are graduating from university, within 1 year of completing college, women are earning 8% less than men with whom they graduated. And by mid-career, the number increases to more than 20%. So this is definitely a link towards that in terms of like earning and having that independence. We see that a lot in the garments factories, where because women are earning, they have more authority to be able to say, okay, I'm going to treat my side of the family as well as your side of the family, because I've earned this much money, and my mom and dad deserves to be treated as much as your mom and dad, as in the husband's mom and dad. So I think if there was a model where we could blend fintech and health tech, that would be awesome, because both are really important. Obviously, education is also important. I will leave it at that. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to go into more detail.
Thank you so much, Ife. I think you shed light on also a lot of the nuances behind just, delivering the service to female customers or male customers and getting them involved also in the process. That was really interesting. We do have quite a few questions in the chat. The first one is addressed to Nila from Sadaf. I hope I pronounced your name properly. So Nila, how would you customize your surveys for uses of technology-driven startup? And in your experience, what areas are more topical in the startup context? Nila, would you like to answer to that?
Sure, thanks, Maxime. I think, it depends obviously on sort of what the company is doing, but we have worked with companies in various stages of growth, so from startups kind of onwards. And so depending on what, the company is most interested in learning, from the operational aspect to the impact data, we can collect a mix of both. So for instance, we can help you understand, how the user first heard about this particular product or service, what is their sort of satisfaction level, what are some of the challenges they face, if they have any, suggestions for improvement. So some of those sort of more operational areas, more linked to kind of the business, as well as some of the impact. And again, that would depend on what the product or service is, and what they're using it for. And I think, yeah, absolutely also can be, customized with a gender angle, if that's also something, you really want to understand in terms of the different experiences of the users. I hope that wasn't too vague. I think it would depend on the company, but just to summarize, yes, they can be customized for different types of companies.
Perfect. Thank you, Nila. We have a few questions to Ivy. First from Dura. What types of roadblocks does Maya encounter during in-person consultations with women, and especially women in rural households or those who aren't as empowered? So how does Maya go about that?
Thank you for that, Dura. I'll start with two angles. One is we've had quite a few roadblocks when we were trying to train our experts. So obviously we have experts who are answering to users. So a lot of the experts were themselves very judgmental, were very things like this doesn't happen in a Muslim country. They were not scientific, they were not biological. So to untrain them, if you know what I mean, like this is not on in a culture like Bangladesh, like they would say things like, if it was my sister, I would have slapped her, I would have like locked her in a room. So around the lines of premarital sex or something. Whereas we had to train them that people are coming to Maya because maybe they have nowhere else to go. We had to train them that your answer should be very biological, your answer should be very scientific, and not religiously biased or culturally biased. So that was one hurdle we had. So we had to really make sure we have 5 pillars in our training. Our medical lead will be able to answer that much better than I am, but the pillars are really about being non-biased, non-judgmental, and those experts go through a very rigorous training in terms of accessing the user's query base. In terms of the users, as you've mentioned, like what were the barriers? Oh, there were many. I mean, initially there was just the non-believers of like, how can this work? How can this work on an internet? And things like that. Then the second one was revealing identity, right? You know, I'm telling you the most deepest, darkest, like, you know, things about my body, about my female parts. Is anyone listening to me? Is anyone finding it out? So which is when we really wanted to focus on messaging over voice or video calls, because we felt if it's an anonymous messaging, we can understand a lot more on the data by using NLP techniques and kind of make that our hook and then move forward. So that was that the belief of telehealth was just not there. And especially when it comes to less empowered women, yes, again, as I was mentioning, they would often communicate via their husband, via their son, or via their brother. And that oftentimes doesn't give the entire picture of what, for example, if they were going to marital rape, oftentimes you can't really talk about it if you don't have access to the phone and if you don't have access or money to even buy a phone. So those are some of the challenges that we faced.
Thank you, Ivy. We do have 2 more questions to you, but maybe I'll pick one, just like being mindful of time. There's one question that talks about the ownership or female ownership of smartphones and internet access, which we knew that there is a difference in terms of like between men and women. So how can they leverage your service, especially in rural areas where the divide is felt the most in terms of ownership of smartphones? Do you work with telecom or mobile operators in some way to help push the gender transformative impact forward?
Yeah, great question, Jordan. Yeah, great question. Something that we've been constantly trying to innovate, trying to come out of it, to come ahead of it. We have worked with telecoms, we worked with Robi. It made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense in terms of reach and access when we worked with Robi. So we reached a lot of users and female. It didn't make business sense for us when we worked with Robi because we also have investors who are backing us and they're looking at ROIs. And when you look at ROIs and the revenue dollars that we were earning from a partnership like Robi wasn't making sense. We were giving too much of our experts time, and what we were receiving was we were just getting squashed. It didn't make sense. So again, I hope there's a world again in the future where we can work with such telecoms, as you mentioned, who has amazing reach, but at the same time, understand and value that companies like Maya is trying to provide and help us sustain in that way. So there's no point charging our experts 10 taka when we are spending 250 taka to have those services, if you know what I mean. So to your question, yes, we've worked with telcos. Another one is basically another reason we are working with the RMG sector is because of that, so that we can try and reach as many women who often don't get access to these kind of healthcare facilities so that their companies can help them. I remember myself when I was working at Barclays, I would go to the bathroom and at the back of the door would be like, and I think that's where I picked up the idea where, are you feeling stressed today? Are you feeling anxious today? Here's a free number that you can call. We've got you covered. So something as little as that coming from your company can really make you feel like good. So I think what Primark is trying to do, what Marks and Spencer is trying to do. And even as we are working with B-Briddhi and Roots of Impact, we have really worked out a model where we want to make sure that the bottom of the pyramid or the marginalized community is getting access. And that's where me, and when I was working with Maxine's team, we really wanted to make sure how are we reaching that community. So we have RMG, we have telcos, we want to work with insurance companies next. We are doing homework, haven't really figured it out. And then of course there's the NGOs and universities that we can work with, again, to reach the masses. But at the same time, when you're a startup and you're kind of have to run like at 100 kilometers per minute, maybe the pace of an NGO or the pace of a university might not collide, and you just have to go past them because you have so many matrices that you have to hit. So either investors can back off and give us some room to not expect those matrices so soon, or the NGO world or the university world where there's a lot of bureaucracy, they need to kind of move fast with the private sector so that we can add value to each other. Happy to take this question offline, happy to get on a call, Jordan, if you have more questions.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Ivy. Just being mindful of time, so thank you very much to all of our panelists and also your questions from the audience. This is a really interesting conversation, and I hope that this is only the start of also paying attention to women as customers when you think about gender inclusion. So again, thanks a lot, Ivy, Neela, and also Natasha. And I hope you all have the good rest of the day and have something to take away with you in whatever you're going to do. So thanks again, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Maxime, and thanks, team, for having us.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.